Liang Mei had never worked a single day in her life. Why would she? Her father owned 3 successful trading businesses in the city, and money was never a problem. She spent her days shopping for expensive silk dresses, meeting friends at tea houses, and spending gold coins like they were nothing. Her room was filled with jewelry, perfumes, and things she bought just because she could. But Liang Mei had a problem. She didn't just spend money. She wasted it. Last month she lost a huge amount gambling with some questionable people her parents had warned her about. The month before that, she insulted one of her father's most important business partners at a dinner party, calling him boring and old-fashioned right to his face. The man was so offended that he canceled a major deal with her father. Her parents tried talking to her. They tried being gentle. They tried being strict. Nothing worked. Liang Mei would apologize, promise to change, and then do something even worse the next week. She thought her parents would always forgive her. She thought there would never be real consequences. She was wrong. One evening, her father called her into his study. His face was different this time. Not angry, not disappointed, just tired and decided. Her mother stood beside him, looking sad but saying nothing. "Liang Mei, sit down," her father said quietly. She sat, already preparing her usual excuses and apologies. "I've arranged a marriage for you," he said simply. Liang Mei laughed. "Father, we've talked about this. I'm not ready to marry yet. Maybe in a few years when..." "You'll leave in 3 days," he continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Your husband's name is Chen Wei. He's a farmer in Willow Creek Village." The room went silent. Liang Mei stared at her father, waiting for him to smile, to say this was a joke. He didn't. "A farmer?" she finally whispered. "You're marrying me to a farmer?" "Yes. But father, I'm your daughter. How can you marry me to some poor peasant from a village? What will people say? What will people say?" Her father's voice rose for the first time. "People already talk, Liang Mei. They talk about how my daughter has no respect, no discipline, no sense of responsibility. They talk about how I've failed as a father because I gave you everything and taught you nothing about real life." Tears started rolling down her cheeks. "Please, father. I'll change. I promise I'll really change this time. Don't do this to me." Her mother finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "We've heard that promise too many times, daughter. Your father and I have talked for weeks about this. It's decided. Chen Wei is a good man. He'll teach you what we couldn't. The value of hard work, the importance of humility, and what it means to earn your place in this world." "But a farmer," Liang Mei sobbed. "I don't know anything about farming. I'll have to live in some dirty village, work in fields, live like a peasant. How can you do this to your own daughter?" Her father's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. "Because I love you, Liang Mei, and if I don't do this now, you'll destroy yourself. You think life will always be easy? You think money solves everything? You need to learn that real value comes from what you build with your own hands, not what you're given." The next 3 days were a nightmare. Liang Mei cried, begged, refused to eat, locked herself in her room. But nothing changed. Her parents packed a small bag for her. Just simple clothes, nothing fancy. No jewelry, no expensive items. She watched them pack away her entire life into one small bag and felt like she was dying. On the morning she had to leave, Liang Mei looked at herself in the mirror one last time. Her eyes were red from crying. Her beautiful room, her comfortable life, everything she knew was about to disappear. She thought about running away, but where would she go? She had no skills, no way to survive on her own. Her father had made sure she had no access to money. The journey to Willow Creek Village took 2 days by cart. Liang Mei sat in silence the whole way, watching the city disappear behind her and the landscape turn into endless fields and small farms. Everything looked so poor, so simple, so terribly boring. When they finally arrived at the village, Liang Mei wanted to cry again. It was even worse than she imagined. Dirt roads, small wooden houses, chickens running around freely, and people wearing simple, worn-out clothes. This was going to be her life now. This terrible, backward place. The cart stopped in front of a small farmhouse at the edge of the village. It wasn't the worst house she'd seen, but compared to her home in the city, it looked like a servant's quarters. There was a small vegetable garden on one side, a chicken coop on the other, and fields stretching out behind the house. A man stepped out of the house. This must be Chen Wei, her husband. Liang Mei looked at him with barely hidden disgust. He was tall and looked strong, probably from all the farm work. His clothes were simple and clean, but clearly old and mended in several places. His hands looked rough and calloused. His face was tanned from working in the sun. Everything about him screamed poor farmer. "You must be Liang Mei," he said quietly. His voice was deeper than she expected and calmer. "Welcome. I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." She didn't answer. She just grabbed her bag and walked past him into the house without a word. If her parents wanted to punish her, fine. But she didn't have to be nice about it. The inside of the house was simple but surprisingly clean. There was a main room with a table and chairs, a small kitchen area, and what looked like two smaller rooms in the back. Everything was made of plain wood. No decorations, no beautiful things, nothing that made it feel like a home. It felt like a prison. "The room on the left is yours," Chen Wei said from the doorway. "I'll take the other one. I've prepared some food if you're hungry. The bathroom is out back. If you need anything." "I won't need anything from you," Liang Mei snapped, turning to face him. "My father forced me to come here, but he can't force me to pretend this is okay. I'm here because I have no choice, but don't expect me to play the role of a happy farmer's wife." Chen Wei looked at her for a long moment. She expected anger, maybe hurt, some kind of reaction. Instead, he just nodded slowly. "I understand. You don't have to be anything you're not. But you're here now, and this is your home for as long as you stay. I'll respect your space, and I hope you'll respect mine." He turned and walked out, leaving her alone. Liang Mei went into her new room and closed the door. The room was tiny compared to her bedroom at home. A simple bed, a small chest for clothes, one window looking out at the fields. She sat on the bed, and it was harder than she expected. Everything about this place was hard. She lay down and stared at the ceiling, tears streaming down her face again. This was her punishment. This was her new life. And she hated every single thing about it. Outside, she could hear Chen Wei moving around, probably doing farm work. The sound of chickens clucking. The wind blowing through the fields. Everything was so quiet, so boring, so completely different from the busy, exciting city she came from. Liang Mei pulled her thin blanket over her head and let herself cry. She didn't care if Chen Wei hurt her. She didn't care about anything anymore. Her life as she knew it was over. And she had no idea how she was going to survive in this terrible place with this poor farmer she was now married to. She fell asleep that night on the hard bed, in the small room, in a house that would never feel like home. Tomorrow would come, and the day after that, and she would have to figure out how to live this new life she never wanted. But tonight she would just let herself be miserable, because right now that was all she had left. The first week was the hardest week of Liang Mei's life. She woke up every morning to the sound of roosters crowing, which she absolutely hated. Back home she used to sleep until late morning, sometimes even past noon. Here the whole village seemed to wake up when the sun rose. Chen Wei would already be up, dressed, and heading out to the fields before she even opened her eyes. At first she stayed in bed out of spite, refusing to follow any kind of farm schedule. But lying in bed all day in that small, boring room was somehow worse than getting up. At least when she got up, she could walk around even if there was nothing interesting to see. Chen Wei never forced her to do anything. He never yelled at her or demanded she help. Every morning, he would leave a simple breakfast on the table, rice porridge, some vegetables, sometimes an egg. Then he would go work. Every evening he would come back covered in dirt and sweat, wash up outside, and prepare a simple dinner. He always made enough for two, even though Liang Mei barely spoke to him. She would eat the food silently, not thanking him, not acknowledging his effort. Then she would go back to her room. This was her routine. This was her rebellion. If she couldn't leave, at least she wouldn't participate. But as days passed, something strange started happening. The silence began to feel heavy. The boredom became unbearable. Back in the city, she was always busy, shopping, gossiping with friends, going to parties. Here there was nothing. No entertainment, no friends, no life. Just endless quiet and the sound of wind through the fields. One morning, about 10 days after her arrival, Liang Mei woke up and Chen Wei wasn't there. She walked outside and saw him in the distance working in the vegetable garden. He was bent over, pulling weeds, his movements steady and practiced. She watched him for a while, and for the first time she really looked at what he was doing. The garden was actually beautiful in a simple way. Neat rows of vegetables, everything organized and healthy looking. There were tomatoes, cabbages, green beans, and plants she didn't even recognize. Everything was growing so well. It was clear that someone who knew what they were doing had planted all this. She walked back inside and found breakfast waiting as usual. But today something felt different. She looked at the food and realized that everything on her plate came from that garden. The vegetables, the herbs, even the rice was probably from his fields. Chen Wei had grown this food with his own hands, and he was sharing it with her even though she treated him terribly. For the first time since arriving, Liang Mei felt something other than anger and self-pity. She felt ashamed. That evening when Chen Wei came back from the fields, Liang Mei was sitting at the table instead of hiding in her room. He looked surprised but said nothing. He washed up and started preparing dinner as usual. "Do you need help?" The words came out quietly, almost embarrassingly. Chen Wei turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "If you want to help, you can wash these vegetables." She stood up and took the vegetables from him. She had no idea how to wash vegetables properly, but how hard could it be? She put them in a bowl and splashed some water on them. Chen Wei glanced over and gently said, "You need to rub them a bit, get the dirt off, and check between the leaves." Liang Mei felt her face get hot. She couldn't even wash vegetables correctly. But she tried again, this time doing it properly. It took her much longer than it should have, but Chen Wei waited patiently, cooking the other parts of the meal. They ate dinner together that night, still mostly in silence, but it felt different. Less hostile. Just quiet. The next morning, Liang Mei woke up earlier. Not as early as Chen Wei, but earlier than before. She found him feeding the chickens in the coop. She stood at a distance watching. The chickens were running around his feet, clucking and fighting over the feed. He seemed comfortable with them, like this was the most natural thing in the world. "Can I try?" she asked. Chen Wei looked at her, and for the first time she saw something like a small smile. He handed her the bucket of feed and showed her how to scatter it evenly so all the chickens could eat. Not too much at once or they'll waste it. Just a handful at a time. Liang Mei threw the first handful and the chickens rushed at her feet. She jumped back, startled, and Chen Wei actually laughed. It was a brief sound, but it was the first time she'd heard him laugh. "They won't hurt you," he said. "They're just excited about breakfast." She tried again, this time standing her ground when the chickens crowded around. It was strange being so close to animals like this. Back home, the only animals she saw were horses pulling carriages, and she never got close to them. These chickens were dirty and loud and honestly kind of stupid, but there was something satisfying about feeding them. Over the next few weeks, Liang Mei started doing more things around the farm. She was terrible at everything at first. When she tried to sweep the floor, she missed half the dirt. When she tried to cook rice, she burned it. When she tried to water the plants, she used too much water, and Chen Wei had to explain that she would drown them. But Chen Wei never got angry with her. He would just show her the right way to do things calmly and clearly. He didn't make fun of her for not knowing basic things. He didn't compare her to other women in the village who could probably do all these things in their sleep. He just taught her, step by step, task by task. One afternoon, Liang Mei was hanging laundry to dry, something she'd finally learned to do properly, when a woman from the village walked by. She was older, maybe around 50, and she stopped to talk. "You must be Chen Wei's new wife," the woman said kindly. "I'm Aunt Huang. I live just down the road." Liang Mei nodded, not sure what to say. She expected judgment, maybe gossip about the city girl who knew nothing about farm life, but Aunt Huang just smiled. "Chen Wei is a good man. Very quiet, very hardworking. We're lucky to have him in our village. He's helped my husband so many times, teaching him better ways to plant crops, lending him tools. Never asked for anything in return." "Really?" Liang Mei was surprised. "Oh yes. Last year, when the harvest was bad for everyone, Chen Wei somehow still had plenty. Instead of selling it all for profit, he shared with families who were struggling. Made sure no one went hungry. He's not like most people with resources. He actually cares about his neighbors." After Aunt Huang left, Liang Mei thought about what she'd said. She'd been so focused on her own misery that she hadn't really thought about who Chen Wei was as a person. She just saw him as the poor farmer she'd been forced to marry. But the more she observed, the more she noticed things that didn't quite fit. Chen Wei's tools were all high quality, not the worn-out equipment she'd seen at other farms. His house was simple, but everything was well-maintained, sturdy, built to last. The seeds he planted, the techniques he used, even with her limited knowledge, she could tell he was doing things differently than other farmers. Better. And the way people treated him in the village was unusual. They didn't just respect him as a neighbor. They respected him like someone important. When they had questions about their crops, they came to him. When they needed advice, they sought him out. For a poor farmer, he had a lot of influence. One evening, about 2 months after her arrival, Liang Mei was preparing dinner. She'd gotten much better at cooking, when she decided to ask him something that had been bothering her. "Chen Wei, can I ask you something?" He looked up from the farming manual he was reading. Wait, he was reading? She hadn't noticed before, but there were actually several books in the house. Not many, but more than she'd expect from a simple farmer. And the way he read quickly and with clear understanding suggested he was educated. "Of course," he said. "Why do you have books about agricultural science? And why do the other farmers always come to you for advice? You're young. How do you know so much?" Chen Wei was quiet for a moment, and she thought maybe he wouldn't answer. But then he said, "I studied agriculture at the Provincial Academy for 3 years. I learned modern farming techniques, soil science, crop rotation, irrigation systems. When I came back to the village, I wanted to use what I learned to help people here grow better crops and live better lives." Liang Mei stared at him. "The Provincial Academy? That was expensive. Very expensive. Only wealthy families could afford to send their children there. How did a poor farmer afford 3 years at the academy?" But before she could ask more questions, Chen Wei stood up. "I need to check on the irrigation channels before it gets dark. The dinner smells good, by the way. You're getting better at cooking." He left, and Liang Mei stood there in the kitchen, confused. Nothing about Chen Wei made sense. He lived like a poor farmer, dressed like a poor farmer, worked like a poor farmer, but he had an education that cost a fortune. He had knowledge that went far beyond basic farming. He had resources that didn't match his lifestyle. Who was Chen Wei, really? And why was he living this way? For the first time since arriving at this farm, Liang Mei felt something other than self-pity or shame. She felt curious. And that curiosity would soon lead her to discover a truth that would change everything she thought she knew about her punishment, her husband, and her own father's plans for her future. Liang Mei couldn't stop thinking about the questions that were piling up in her mind. She started paying closer attention to everything around her, looking for answers that Chen Wei wasn't giving her. The more she looked, the more things seemed strange, like the way Chen Wei handled money. One day, she went with him to the village market to sell vegetables. She watched as he negotiated prices with buyers, and she recognized the techniques immediately. Her father had taught her about business, even though she never paid much attention. But Chen Wei was using advanced negotiation strategies, reading people's body language, knowing exactly when to hold firm and when to compromise. This wasn't just a farmer selling vegetables. This was someone who understood commerce at a deep level, and he always seemed to have money when he needed it. Not a lot at once, but enough. He never seemed worried about expenses. When a tool broke, he replaced it with a good one. When the roof needed repair, he bought quality materials. For someone who was supposed to be poor, he managed resources surprisingly well. Then there was the mysterious paperwork she found one day while cleaning. She wasn't snooping, at least that's what she told herself. She was just organizing the main room when she found a folder tucked behind some books. Inside were documents about land ownership, not just the small farm they lived on, but several other properties in neighboring villages. Purchase agreements, rental contracts, income statements. Her hands shook as she read through them. This was a lot of land. This represented a lot of money. What was going on? She quickly put everything back exactly as she found it. Her heart was racing. She didn't know what to think. Was Chen Wei hiding something? Was this even his paperwork, or did it belong to someone else? That night at dinner, she couldn't act normal. Chen Wei noticed. "Is something wrong?" he asked. "No, nothing," she said too quickly. He looked at her for a moment, and she had the strange feeling that he knew exactly what she'd found, but he didn't say anything more. They finished dinner in uncomfortable silence. 3 days later, everything changed. Liang Mei was in the garden, picking vegetables for lunch. She'd actually gotten good at this. She could tell which vegetables were ready to harvest and which needed more time. She was proud of herself, even though it was such a simple thing. 3 months ago, she wouldn't have believed she could do any of this. She heard the sound of horses and cartwheels on the road. Visitors were rare, so she looked up, curious. What she saw made her drop the basket of vegetables. 3 elegant carriages were coming down the road toward their farm. These weren't ordinary village carts. These were expensive carriages, the kind that wealthy merchants and officials used, the kind her own family owned back in the city. The horses were beautiful, well-bred animals. The drivers wore formal uniforms. The carriages stopped in front of the house and several well-dressed men stepped out. They wore fine silk robes, the kind that cost more than most farmers made in a year. Liang Mei stood frozen in the garden, dirt on her hands and her simple farm clothes suddenly feeling very shabby. Chen Wei came out of the house, and Liang Mei expected him to be surprised or nervous. Instead, he looked completely calm, like he'd been expecting them. "Young Master Chen," one of the men said, bowing deeply. The others bowed too. "Please forgive our unexpected visit. We have urgent business matters that require your attention." "Young Master Chen?" Liang Mei felt like the ground was shifting under her feet. What did that mean? "It's fine," Chen Wei said calmly. "Come inside. We can talk in private." He glanced toward the garden and saw Liang Mei standing there staring. Their eyes met for a brief moment and she saw something in his expression. Was it apology? Regret? She couldn't tell. Then he turned and led the men inside the house. Liang Mei stood there for what felt like forever, her mind spinning. Young Master Chen. That was a title used for sons of wealthy families. Very wealthy families. The kind of families that owned businesses, land, had political connections. The kind of families like her own. She slowly walked closer to the house, not sure what to do. She could hear voices inside but couldn't make out the words. The conversation lasted about an hour. Finally, the men came out, bowed again to Chen Wei and left in their fancy carriages. Chen Wei stood outside watching them go. Then he turned and saw Liang Mei standing there. She'd been waiting and now she wanted answers. "Who were those men?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Why did they call you young master? What's going on, Chen Wei?" He sighed deeply and gestured to the bench outside the house. "Sit down. I think it's time I told you the truth." Liang Mei sat, her heart pounding. She wasn't sure she was ready for whatever he was about to say. Chen Wei sat beside her, looking out at the fields. "My full name is Chen Wei, and I'm the only son of the Chen family from the capital. My family owns trading companies, land, and businesses across 3 provinces. By most standards, we're very wealthy, very powerful." Liang Mei couldn't breathe. This couldn't be real. "When I was 20 years old," he continued, "my father started preparing me to take over the family business. I attended the best schools, learned about commerce and politics, met with important people. I had everything that most people dream about. Money, status, a bright future. Then why are you here?" Liang Mei whispered. "Why are you living like this?" "Because I hated that life," Chen Wei said simply. "The more I learned about business and politics, the more disgusted I became. Everyone was so fake. People smiled at you because of your money, not because they cared about you. Friends betrayed each other over business deals. Family members fought over inheritance. Everyone was always trying to use everyone else." He paused, his jaw tight with old anger. "I watched my father step on smaller businesses to grow his own empire. I watched wealthy families waste money on parties while people in the countryside struggled to eat. I saw so much greed, so much corruption, so much emptiness, and everyone just accepted it. They said that's how the world works. I didn't want to be part of that world anymore, so I left. I told my father I wanted to do something different with my life. He was furious at first, thought I was being young and foolish. But eventually he made me a deal. He would give me enough money to start over, but after that, I would be on my own. No family money, no family name, no family connections. I had to prove I could make something meaningful by myself." Liang Mei listened, shocked. She'd never heard of anyone walking away from that kind of wealth and privilege. It seemed insane. "I came here 5 years ago," Chen Wei said. "I bought this land and started farming. I studied everything I could about agriculture and started teaching myself and helping other farmers improve their methods. I took the money my father gave me and invested it carefully, buying land when prices were low, helping fund village projects, creating systems that would benefit everyone, not just me. Those men today," he continued, "they manage my investments. I still make business decisions, but from here, I live simply, but I use the money I make to do good things, build schools, improve irrigation systems, help farmers get fair prices for their crops. This is the life I chose because it has meaning. It has purpose." Liang Mei's mind was reeling. All this time she thought she was being punished by being sent to a poor farmer. But Chen Wei wasn't poor. He was probably wealthier than her own family. He just chose to live this way. "Does my father know?" she asked quietly. Did he know who you really were when he sent me here? Chen Wei looked at her directly. Yes, he knew everything. Our fathers are old friends, actually. They've known each other for 30 years. When your father told me about you, about your situation, we talked for a long time. He asked me if I would consider this arrangement. So this was all planned? Liang Mei felt anger rising in her chest. My father sent me here as part of some scheme? Not a scheme, Chen Wei said carefully. A chance. Your father was worried about you, Liang Mei. He said you were headed down a dangerous path and he didn't know how to help you anymore. He thought maybe living here, learning what real work and real life felt like might change you. He asked me if I would be willing to let you come here, to give you a chance to grow. And you agreed? Just like that? You agreed to marry some spoiled city girl you'd never met? I told him I wouldn't force anything, Chen Wei said. You could come here, see what this life was like. If after a few months you still hated it and wanted to leave, you could. But I promised to give you a chance to discover who you could be without all the distractions and privileges of city life. Liang Mei stood up, feeling overwhelmed, angry, confused, betrayed. So everything has been a lie. You've been pretending to be poor, watching me struggle to learn basic tasks, probably laughing at me the whole time. I've never laughed at you, Chen Wei said, standing up too. I've watched you transform yourself, Liang Mei. Do you understand how rare that is? Most people never change, even when they need to. But you did. You learned, you grew, you became someone stronger. Because I thought I had no choice, she shouted. I thought I had to survive with a poor farmer. If I'd known you were rich, I would have... She stopped. She would have what? Treated him better from the start? Been nicer because of his money? The realization made her feel sick. Exactly, Chen Wei said quietly. If you'd known, you would have acted differently. Not because of who I am, but because of what I have. That's the whole problem with that world, Liang Mei. People treat each other based on money and status, not character. I needed to know who you really were, and you needed to discover who you could really be. Liang Mei felt tears on her cheeks. She was so angry, so confused, and underneath it all she felt something else. Humiliation. Because he was right. If she'd known he was wealthy from the start, she would have treated him completely differently. I need to think, she said, her voice breaking. I need time alone. She walked away from him toward the fields, her whole world turned upside down once again. Nothing was what she thought it was. Her punishment wasn't a punishment. The poor farmer wasn't poor, and the person she'd been becoming over these months, was that even real? Or was it all part of someone else's plan for her? She didn't know anymore. She didn't know anything. Liang Mei walked through the fields until she couldn't see the house anymore. She sat down on a large rock near the irrigation channel and just cried. She cried from anger, from embarrassment, from confusion. Everything she thought she understood about her life here had been a lie. She stayed out there for hours, watching the sun move across the sky, thinking about everything. The more she thought, the more complicated her feelings became. Yes, she felt betrayed, but she also couldn't deny what had happened to her over the past 3 months. She had changed. The girl who arrived here bitter and angry and useless wasn't the same person sitting on this rock right now. She'd learned to cook, to clean, to work with her hands. She'd learned to wake up early, to appreciate simple things, to find satisfaction in doing tasks well. She'd stopped thinking only about herself and started noticing the people around her, and Chen Wei. She thought about all the moments between them. The way he patiently taught her without making her feel stupid. The way he never demanded anything from her but always left food for her, always made sure she had what she needed. The quiet respect he showed her even when she treated him terribly at first. Had any of that been fake? She didn't think so. His kindness felt real. His patience felt real. The person he was felt real, even if the poverty had been an act. When the sun started setting, Liang Mei finally walked back to the house. Chen Wei was sitting outside waiting. He stood up when he saw her. I need to ask you something, she said before he could speak, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. If I had kept being terrible, if I had refused to change or learn anything, what would you have done? Would you have sent me back to my father? Chen Wei thought for a moment. Honestly, I don't know. I hoped you would find something here worth staying for, but I couldn't force you to change. That had to come from you. But yes, if after several months you were still miserable and refusing to even try, I would have talked to your father about other options. And now? What happens now that I know the truth? That's up to you, Chen Wei said quietly. You can stay or you can leave. Either way, you're not trapped here. You never were, really. You always had a choice. No, Liang Mei said, shaking her head. I didn't have a choice at first. I was sent here against my will. But now, she paused, trying to find the right words. Now I need to decide if I'm staying because I have to or because I want to. And I need time to figure that out. How much time do you need? 30 days, she said. Give me 30 days to decide. Don't try to convince me either way. Just let me figure out what I really want. Chen Wei nodded. 30 days. That's fair. The next morning started the strangest month of Liang Mei's life. She and Chen Wei continued living together, working together, but now everything felt different. She kept watching him, trying to separate the Chen Wei she'd come to know from the wealthy young Master Chen she'd just discovered. She noticed things she hadn't paid attention to before. The way he spoke was more educated than she'd realized, but he'd hidden it well by using simple words. The way he moved had a certain confidence that came from growing up with privilege. The way he made decisions showed years of training and education, but she also saw the things that were genuinely him, not an act. The way he treated everyone with respect, regardless of their status. The way he found joy in simple things like watching crops grow or fixing something that was broken. The way he seemed truly happy living this simple life, even though he could have anything he wanted. 1 week into her 30 days, Liang Mei went to the village market alone. She walked through the stalls, listening to people talk. She heard 2 women gossiping near the vegetable stands. That Chen Wei is such a good man, one said. When my son was sick last year and we couldn't afford medicine, he paid for everything. Didn't ask for anything back. My husband says Chen Wei taught him new farming techniques that doubled our harvest, the other woman replied. We're actually making enough money now to send our daughter to school. I don't know where he learned all these things, but he's changed our whole village. Liang Mei walked away feeling strange. These people loved Chen Wei, and it had nothing to do with his money. They didn't even know he was wealthy. They loved him because of what he did, how he treated them, the way he helped without expecting anything in return. On the 15th day, something happened that changed everything. Liang Mei was working in the garden when she saw an expensive carriage coming down the road. For a moment she thought it might be more of Chen Wei's business associates, but as it got closer her heart sank. She recognized that carriage. It belonged to her family. The carriage stopped and her mother stepped out. She looked the same as always, elegant and well-dressed, completely out of place in the simple village setting. When she saw Liang Mei in her plain work clothes with dirt under her fingernails and her hair tied back simply, her mother's eyes filled with tears. My daughter, she said, rushing forward. Look what they've done to you. Living like a peasant working in fields. This is terrible. Mother, why are you here? Liang Mei asked, though she felt oddly defensive about her mother's words. To bring you home, of course. Things have changed. Your father's business is in trouble. We need you to come back. There's a merchant from the north, very wealthy. His son wants to marry you. This marriage could save our family business. Liang Mei felt cold. What kind of man is he? Her mother hesitated. He's practical, business-minded, maybe a little strict, but from a very good family. You're avoiding the question. What have you heard about him? Her mother sighed. People say he has a temper, that he's difficult to please. But Liang Mei, we don't have a choice. The business is failing. Creditors are demanding payment. If you marry him, his family will invest in our business. You'll be saving your father, saving all of us. So you want me to marry a man with a temper, a man known for being cruel just to save money? You make it sound so cold, her mother said, looking hurt. We're family. Family helps each other. And honestly, is this life really better? Living like a poor farmer's wife? Don't you miss your old life? The comfort, the ease, having servants, going to parties, wearing beautiful clothes? Liang Mei looked down at her worn work dress, at her calloused hands. 3 months ago, she would have said yes without hesitation. She would have done anything to get back to her old life. But now, Mother, I need to think about this. What is there to think about? You're coming home. I brought fresh clothes for you. We can leave today. No, Liang Mei said firmly. I'm not leaving today. I need time to think. Her mother looked shocked. Time to think? Liang Mei, your family needs you. Your father sent me here specifically to bring you back. He's counting on you to do the right thing. The right thing for who? For the family business? Or for me? Sometimes they're the same thing, her mother said quietly. Sometimes we have to sacrifice what we want for the people we love. After her mother left, angry and disappointed, Liang Mei sat outside the house feeling torn in two. Chen Wei found her there an hour later. I heard you had a visitor, he said carefully. My mother. She wants me to come home. Actually, they need me to come home. To marry some merchant's son and save the family business. Chen Wei was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do? I don't know, Liang Mei said honestly. Part of me feels like I owe my family. They raised me, gave me everything. Now they're in trouble and they need help. Shouldn't I help them? That depends, Chen Wei said. Are they asking you to help or to sacrifice yourself? There's a difference. What do you mean? Helping means everyone benefits, including you. Sacrifice means you give up your happiness, your future, your life, for someone else's benefit. Your mother didn't ask if you'd be happy with this man. She didn't ask if you wanted this. She just expected you to agree because the family needs money. Liang Mei felt tears on her face. But isn't that what family does? Sacrifice for each other? Sometimes, Chen Wei agreed. But real love, real family doesn't ask you to destroy yourself. They find another way. Your father sent you here to learn and grow, not to prepare you to be sold to the highest bidder. You don't understand, Liang Mei said. You walked away from your family wealth, but they were fine without you. My family will lose everything if I don't do this. Maybe they need to lose everything, Chen Wei said quietly. Maybe that's how they'll learn the same lessons you did. That real value doesn't come from money and status, that people matter more than businesses. He stood up. You have 15 more days to decide what you want to do. Whatever you choose, I'll respect it. But I hope you choose based on what you want, not what you think you owe. That night, Liang Mei couldn't sleep. She thought about her family, about duty and obligation. She thought about the merchant's son with his temper and his money. She thought about her old life of comfort and ease, but she also thought about the feeling of satisfaction when she harvested vegetables she'd grown herself. She thought about the village women who smiled at her now, who taught her things and treated her like a friend. She thought about watching the sunrise over the fields each morning. She thought about quiet dinners with Chen Wei, comfortable silences working side by side. She thought about who she used to be and who she'd become, and she thought about who she would become if she went back, another unhappy wife in a loveless marriage, trading herself for money, just like so many other women in wealthy families. The choice she faced wasn't really about staying or leaving. It was about deciding who she wanted to be, and for the first time in her life, Liang Mei realized that decision was completely up to her. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Liang Mei's life. She kept going back and forth in her mind, changing her decision every few hours. Some mornings she would wake up determined to go back to the city and help her family. By evening, she would be certain she wanted to stay. She started paying attention to everything with new eyes, trying to memorize it all in case she left. The way the morning mist looked over the fields. The sound of the chickens greeting her when she fed them. The smell of the soil after it rained. The tired but satisfied feeling at the end of a day of real work. And Chen Wei. She watched him more carefully than ever. The way he smiled when he saw new sprouts growing in the garden. The patient way he explained things to young farmers who came asking for advice. The gentle strength in his hands when he fixed broken tools. The intelligence in his eyes when he read at night. She realized something that made her heart hurt. Somewhere in these 4 months, without meaning to, she had started to care about him, not because of his money. She'd fallen for him when she thought he was poor. Not because of his status. She'd grown to respect him when she thought he was just a simple farmer. She cared about him because of who he was as a person, but she couldn't tell him that, not now when she might be leaving. It wouldn't be fair to either of them. On the 28th day, just 2 days before she had to decide, Liang Mei was in the village market buying supplies when she overheard a conversation that changed everything. 2 merchants were talking near the tea stall, and one name caught her attention. Did you hear about the Liu family from the capital? Total disaster. The wealthy merchants? What happened? The youngest daughter refused to marry that merchant's son from the north. You know, the one everyone warned was cruel. Her family was furious because they needed the marriage alliance to save their business. But the girl stood her ground. That must have taken courage. Those families don't take no for an answer. That's the interesting part. Her family tried everything to force her, but she refused. Eventually, Some of their old business partners heard what was happening. They didn't like that the family was trying to force their daughter into a bad marriage just for money. Several of them came together and helped restructure the family's debt, gave them better terms, helped them rebuild properly. So it worked out? Better than that? The family business is recovering and the daughter is apparently much happier. They learned you can't build success on your children's unhappiness. Sometimes doing the right thing opens doors you didn't know existed. Liang Mei walked away from the market in a daze. That story felt like a message, like the universe showing her what could happen if she stood up for herself. Maybe her family would find another way. Maybe they needed to learn their own lessons just like she had. That evening, she sat down with Chen Wei for dinner. They'd been eating mostly in silence for the past 2 weeks, both aware that her decision time was almost up. Chen Wei, she said suddenly, can I ask you something? Always. When you left your family's wealth, when you chose this life, were you scared? He thought about it. Terrified. I was giving up everything I'd known, everything that made me feel secure. I had no idea if I could really do it, if I could build something meaningful on my own, but I was more scared of becoming someone I hated. Sometimes the fear of losing yourself is stronger than the fear of losing everything else. Liang Mei nodded slowly. I think I understand now. What you were trying to teach me all along. I wasn't trying to teach you anything, Chen Wei said gently. I was just giving you space to figure things out yourself. Teachers can only show you doors. You have to choose to walk through them. I've made my decision, Liang Mei said, her voice steady. I'm staying. Chen Wei looked at her and she saw something flash in his eyes. Relief, hope, but his voice stayed calm. Are you sure? This isn't an easy life? It's simple, but it's hard work. And your family, my family will have to find another way, Liang Mei interrupted. I love them, but I can't sacrifice my whole life for their business mistakes. That's not love. That's not what family should be. If they really care about me, they'll understand. And if they don't, then I'll have to accept that and move forward anyway. What about the merchant's son? Your mother said, I don't care what she said. I'm not marrying someone cruel just because he has money. I did that math already. A lifetime of misery isn't worth any amount of gold. She paused, then added quietly, besides, I think I'm already married to someone who taught me what really matters. Chen Wei reached across the table and took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched her with real tenderness, and Liang Mei felt warmth spread through her chest. I need to tell you something too, he said. I want you to stay, but not out of obligation or because you feel trapped. I want you to stay because you want to build a life here with me, not as some arrangement our fathers made, but as a real partnership. As equals. Equals, Liang Mei smiled a little. You're still much better at farming than me. You're better at organizing the market sales, and your ideas about expanding the cooperative have been brilliant. We each have our strengths. He squeezed her hand. Liang Mei, I need you to know something. I've watched you transform over these months, and somewhere along the way I fell in love with the person you became. Not the rich merchant's daughter you were, but the strong, determined, genuine woman you are now. Liang Mei felt tears in her eyes, but this time they were happy tears. I fell in love with a poor farmer who turned out to be rich. I'm not sure what that says about me. It says you fell in love with who I am, not what I have. That's everything. The next morning, Liang Mei asked Chen Wei to help her write a letter to her parents. She wanted to be clear, to explain her decision properly. She told them she was staying, that she'd found something real and valuable here. She told them she loved them but couldn't sacrifice herself for their business. She suggested they reach out to old business partners, restructure honestly, rebuild properly. She told them she hoped they would understand, but even if they didn't, she had to follow her own path now. Chen Wei arranged for the letter to be delivered immediately. Then he surprised her with another revelation. I already contacted some of my father's business associates, he admitted. I asked them to look into your family's situation. If they're willing to make real changes, to do business honestly and fairly, there are people willing to help them restructure their debts and get back on their feet. Without you having to marry anyone, you did that. Why? Because I wanted you to choose this life freely, without the weight of your family's problems forcing your hand. Whatever you decided, I wanted it to be really your choice. Liang Mei hugged him then, truly hugged him for the first time. Thank you. For everything. For being patient with me. For teaching me without breaking me. For showing me that there's more to life than what I thought I knew. 2 weeks later, Liang Mei's parents came to visit. Her father looked older, more tired but also somehow lighter. Her mother seemed subdued. They walked around the farm, seeing everything Liang Mei had learned to do, watching her work alongside Chen Wei with natural ease. Finally, her father spoke. "I owe you an apology, daughter, and an explanation." They sat together under a tree and her father told her the whole truth. He'd known about Chen Wei's real identity from the beginning. The two families had been friends for decades. When her father saw Liang Mei heading down a dangerous path, destroying herself with her behavior, he'd been desperate. He'd asked his old friend for help, and together they'd created this plan. "I didn't send you here to punish you," her father said, his voice thick with emotion. "I sent you here to save you. I watched you becoming someone shallow and lost, and I didn't know how else to help you find yourself. Chen Wei agreed to give you a chance to discover who you could really be, away from all the money and status and distractions." "I was so angry when I found out," Liang Mei admitted. It felt like a betrayal. It probably was, in a way. But it was done out of love. Misguided maybe, manipulative certainly, but out of love. Her father looked at her seriously.
"Can you forgive an old man who didn't know how else to help his daughter?"
Liang Mei looked at her father, at her mother, and felt the anger that had been sitting in her chest finally dissolve. "Yes, I forgive you. Because even though the method was wrong, the result was right. I found myself here. I found my purpose. I found love." Her mother wiped tears from her eyes. "You look happy, daughter. Really happy? I've never seen you like this before. I am happy. For the first time in my life, I'm genuinely happy." Before her parents left, her father pulled Chen Wei aside. Liang Mei watched them talk, saw her father bow respectfully to Chen Wei, saw Chen Wei embrace him like family. Whatever had been said, it looked like peace had been made. Months passed, then a year. Liang Mei and Chen Wei built something beautiful together. They expanded the agricultural cooperative, bringing modern techniques to more villages. They started a school teaching both traditional farming and new methods. They created a market system that gave local farmers fair prices and direct access to city buyers. Liang Mei used her merchant family's business knowledge combined with Chen Wei's agricultural expertise. Together, they were more effective than either could have been alone. The community thrived. Children had better education. Families had better income. The whole region began to prosper. Her parents' business recovered just as Chen Wei had arranged. They learned to operate more honestly, more fairly, and found that good business practices actually worked better than the corrupt methods they'd used before. One evening, as the sun set over their fields, Liang Mei stood beside Chen Wei, watching the golden light paint everything beautiful. Their hands were dirty from planting new crops. Their clothes were simple and worn. They were tired from a long day of work, and Liang Mei had never felt richer in her entire life. "Do you ever regret it?" Chen Wei asked quietly. "Giving up your old life? The comfort, the luxury?" Liang Mei looked at him, at the land they'd built together, at the community they'd helped create, at the life they were living with.